A few years ago, I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina for work. I didn't know many people there, and after a few lonely months, I finally downloaded a dating app. I told myself I wasn't looking for anything serious. I just wanted to meet people, maybe have a normal conversation, maybe feel less alone in a city where nobody knew my name. That's how I matched with Mason. At first, he seemed almost perfect. He was handsome, confident, and polite in a way that felt rare. He worked in finance, drove a black luxury SUV, wore expensive coats, and always seemed like he had his life completely together. On our first date, he took me to a quiet rooftop restaurant downtown. He asked about my job, my family, my favorite coffee, even the small town where I grew up. The thing that impressed me was how much he remembered from our messages. Small details, tiny things most people forget. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Looking back, I think he was studying me. The second date felt different. He wasn't rude and he never raised his voice, but something about him became too intense. He kept talking like we already had a serious connection. He said things like, "I feel like I've known you forever, and some people are meant to find each other." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do, but deep down I felt uncomfortable. There was pressure in the way he looked at me, like he had already decided what I was supposed to be in his life. The next morning, I woke up to 3 messages from him. By noon, there were 9. By evening, he was asking why I was pulling away. I hadn't even had time to respond properly. That was enough for me. I sent him one polite message saying I didn't feel a connection, and I wished him the best. Then I blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it. For a few days, everything was normal. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, watched TV, and tried not to think about him. Then one night, I noticed a dark SUV parked across the street from my apartment building. At first, I didn't care. It was a busy street. Cars parked there all the time. But the next night, it was there again. And the night after that, same spot, same dark tinted windows, same black SUV. By the 4th night, I started watching it from behind my blinds. I never saw the driver clearly, and that was the first time I felt like someone was watching me. That Saturday, I went to a grocery store about 15 minutes away from my apartment. The store was busy, bright, and normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following me. Every time I turned into another aisle, I thought I saw the same man at the far end, dark jacket, baseball cap, phone in his hand. He wasn't staring openly, but he was always there just long enough for me to notice him. I told myself I was being paranoid, but when I walked out to the parking lot, my stomach dropped. The same dark SUV was parked 2 spaces away from my car. I loaded my groceries as fast as I could and drove home using a different route. That night, I received flowers at my apartment. There was no card, no name, no sender. 2 days later, something worse happened. An envelope had been slipped under my apartment door. Inside was a printed photo of me carrying groceries from my car to my building. The photo had clearly been taken from across the street. That was when I called the police. An officer came by, took my statement, and told me to call again if I saw the SUV. I barely slept that night. Around 11:30 p.m. and I looked through the blinds and there it was. The SUV was parked outside again. This time, the police arrived quickly. I watched from my living room window as 2 officers approached the vehicle. A man stepped out. He wasn't Mason. He was older, rough-looking, and he immediately showed the officers some kind of ID. They spoke for several minutes before one officer came up to my apartment. He told me the man outside was a licensed private investigator. His name was Reed. He had been hired by a client to gather information about me. I asked who hired him, but the officer said Reed wouldn't give the name. That should have made me feel safer, but it didn't. It made everything worse. Someone wasn't just watching me. Someone was paying a professional to do it. The next afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Reed. He apologized for scaring me and asked if we could meet somewhere public. I almost hung up, but his voice sounded tired and serious, not threatening. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. When Reed walked in, he looked nothing like I expected. He didn't look slick or mysterious. He looked embarrassed. He sat across from me and said, "The man who hired me is named Mason." My blood went cold. Reed said Mason told him I was his long-term girlfriend. He said I had become unstable and that he was only trying to make sure I was safe. At first, Reed believed him. Then Mason's requests became strange. He wanted to know what time my bedroom light turned off. He wanted descriptions of any men who visited me, and he wanted close-up photos of my windows. That's when Reed realized Mason wasn't worried about me. He was obsessed with me. Reed told me he stopped taking Mason's calls, but before cutting contact, he discovered something important. Mason had rented a short-term house directly across the street from my apartment building. For the past several nights, Reed had actually been watching Mason because he was worried Mason might try something. I didn't know whether to trust Reed, but everything he said made sense. The SUV, the photos, the flowers, the feeling that someone was always nearby, it all connected back to Mason. The police still couldn't do much without stronger proof, so I stayed with my friend Nina for a few days. I thought leaving my apartment would help me breathe, but 2 nights later, another envelope arrived at Nina's house. Inside were 3 photos. The first showed me at the grocery store. The second showed me standing outside Nina's front door. And the third photo almost made me drop to the floor. It was a picture of my bedroom window, taken from inside my apartment. I hadn't been home in 2 days. That changed everything. The police checked my apartment. There were no broken windows, no forced entry, and no obvious signs that anyone had been inside. Somehow that made it even scarier. Someone had either copied my key, picked the lock, or found a way in without leaving a trace. Reed gave the police everything he had. Mason's rented address, vehicle details, call history, and every timestamp from his surveillance. Then Reed found the next piece of the puzzle. Mason had been visiting a self-storage facility on the edge of town almost every night. The police got a warrant. Inside Inside the storage unit, they found hundreds of printed photos of me. Photos outside my office, photos of the grocery store, photos of my apartment building, photos from places I had never even seen Mason. There were notebooks too. Pages and pages filled with times, dates, outfits, routines, and comments about who I talked to. But the worst part was at the back of the unit. Mason had built a fake version of my apartment. A cheap couch, a small lamp that looked like mine, a fake kitchen counter, even a framed print on the wall that looked almost identical to the one hanging above my real couch. It looked like he had been practicing a life with me. Then Reed found one photo pinned higher than the others. It was older than all the rest. It showed me leaving work 6 months before I ever matched with Mason on the dating app. That was when I understood the truth. Mason didn't find me through the app. He found me first. The app was just how we got close. That same night, police went to the rented house across from my apartment. Mason was inside. According to the report, he didn't run. He didn't panic. He just looked confused and asked why they were interrupting our relationship, a relationship that never existed. I moved out less than a month later. Even now, years later, I still check parked cars when I come home at night. I still close my blinds before sunset, and I still think about that first date. How normal he looked, how polite he sounded, how easy it was to mistake obsession for charm. The scariest part is knowing that if Mason had stayed patient, I might never have realized I was being watched at all.